Action!
Hey everybody, it's Gil here with the Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser, and in this week's video we're going to do something a little bit different. If you live on a boat or a caravan, RV, or even tiny house living, there's a chance you want to do things that are just a little bit more eco-friendly. Part of that usually ends up being plastic grocery bags. We try not to use them when we can, but honestly we're not great about following through on that all the time. So in today's video we're going to recycle some old material. For us it's going to be old sail material, but if you don't have sail material, it can be any old material you want to reuse. It could be bedspreads, it could be sheets, it could be curtains, any kind of material that you think you can recycle and make grocery bags out of it. For us, we're going to use this sail. We have an old one here and I'm going to show you how to go about doing it. Now, in full disclosure, this is our first time doing it, but I will not post this video unless it all works out and I can give you some tips and use this as an instructional video. So hopefully I'm not doing all this for naught, and at the end of this we can reuse this video and you'll be able to see how to do it for yourself. Let me get out the supplies and we'll get started. So here we have an old sail. So we're going to take a look and see if we can find a couple of interesting spots that we want to use as our pattern for the material. Let me stretch this out. So what we have here is an old mainsail, and I'm going to go ahead and cut two panels that are 21 inches by 20 inches, and those are going to form the sides of the bag. So what's interesting is I think as I do this, I want to have some interesting spots of sort of character, right? Like where this is triple stitched, just kind of a neat look instead of just a plain bag. The good news is at 21 by 20, I think I'll have several spots that will probably work. So what do you think? This part up here look kind of cool? Mm-hmm. All right. That's going to be a thick part too, so we'll see how well that works on the sewing machine.
It'll be tear resistant.
It'll be tear resistant. I'm afraid it's going to be sewing machine resistant, so we'll see how well it works. All right, let's cut these panels out. So I'm going to start by removing the bolt rope here. This is actually the bolt rope that goes along the boom, and I'm on the outhaul end right here. So I'm going to just cut this straight because this is way too thick for the edge of the bag. For those of you who don't know, a sail has an actual rope sewn right into it, and then there's a groove in the boom and this slides into it. So if you're watching this in a non-sailor, that's the way that works, and it holds it down in place. We call that a bolt rope. So I think to make this easy, I'm going to mark this stick at 21 and 20. It'll make it a little easier to do. So now that I've cut these up each side, I'm now going to cut them. That's 20 inches. Each one's 20 inches wide, and now I'm coming down here at the 21-inch height. So I found something kind of interesting. It's probably best if you make a 21 by 20 inch pattern as you cut these. It's a little bit deceiving because a sail is not square and it's sewn with a belly in it. It's actually a little bit unique. You starting to follow the lines of the stitches that are on the sail as opposed to the actual square lines you need. So definitely encourage you to make a pattern and trace around it, especially as you start getting into some of the more interesting design and sew looks on the sail pattern itself. So the first thing to note is we want to cut two panels that are 21 inches by 20 inches to form our bag. I cut out a couple of pieces earlier off camera, and what's interesting is because a sail is not a square piece of material and it has areas that let it billow out, it also has these angled lines of seams going down the material. It's a little bit deceiving. It's almost hard to do a straight line. So I would suggest that you use something as a template before you do this. And for me, I'm just using a piece of paper that I've marked out. This one happens to be 21 inches by 18 inches, so I'm going to extend the line out 2 inches when I do this. But it's going to work just fine, and this will give me the ability to get the look I want with it. Now, when you're using a sail or some other kind of material, you want to look at the material and find sort of an interesting design feature. And for us, one of them here is this triple zigzag stitch where the Dacron pieces are sewn together. I'm going to start with that. This is a basic bag, and you know, this has the sail logo, the manufacturer of the boat's logo on it. I'm going to wait and do that after I've practiced and get a little better at it. So let's go ahead and get this template marked up just using my paper here. All right, now that we have our pieces cut out, what you want to do is you want to look at your material and you decide what your pattern is going to be. You want the part that's going to be visible on the outside of the bag when it's done to be facing each other, right? So the outside of this would be the inside fabric. Now with a sail, that doesn't matter, but if this was a printed pattern, my pattern would be on here and here, right? And then this would be the inside of the material, essentially the outside of the bag. But you know, I want to look at it and kind of decide what design elements do I like. I like these horizontal stripes that go up it. So I'm going to leave it like that. And this is the way I'm going to do it. Normally we would pin these together before we sew it, but in this case, I won't bother just because of the material I'm using and the fact that I'm using a heavy duty sewing machine for sails. So yeah, let's get started. I've got my sailcloth here and I'm just going to sew right now along this edge. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the sail right and go ahead and sew it.
He's gonna sew that thing I don't like. If I had that machine, but that is cool. But I did not know that that was cool.
We want to do a 1/2 inch seam along this edge. So the nice thing about this sewing machine is I can just use the presser feet, the walking feet, as a guide. I also have a little magnetic attachment for the sailrite that lets me line it up, but I think I'm not going to use that here.
How's it looking?
So far, it doesn't look great, but it's going to look better in a minute. First stitch done, let me show you what we do next. So now that we have our piece here, what we want to do is we want to open it up. We have our stitch right here. We're going to fold it out this way. And essentially what we want to do is try to stretch this out a little bit and just put our seam allowance out here and just press it down with our thumbs. We're trying to open it up a little bit. Now some people will sew a thicker piece of rectangular material right here to give this thing a good sort of flat bottom, and when it stands up that would allow the bag to stand up kind of on its own. Think about a paper grocery bag, the way they stand up. I don't think I want to do that because oftentimes I'm going to want to throw this thing into a duffel bag and carry it to a local store. Now I just want to come back here again, and this time we're going to fold these over 1 inch. We want to do that on both sides. We want them to be even because when the bag stands up, this is the height we're going to see, right? We want these lips or top edges to be nice and even with one another. I'm just using the back end of a pair of scissors to crease it. It makes it a little easier to sew that way. So now that we have this bottom seam opened up, we have our top edges folded, we're now going to go ahead and essentially sew the sides of the bag. So now that we have these top sides folded down like little wings here that are going to form the top rib of the bag, I'm now going to sew up the sides. And again, if you were using regular cloth, you'd pin this. I don't want to pin it because it kind of pokes holes in this Dacron material. It doesn't look good. So I'm going to start sewing it from the bottom where I have this seam from earlier, just because if they're not even, that'll help pull them together and I can adjust at the very end if I need to. Tell you what, this magnetic thing from Sailrite's pretty darn strong. I want to make sure we have these good and lined up since I'm not pinning them. So as I get close to this edge, I'm now making sure that my my top edges and where this seam is going to be are nice and flush. And I have one that's a little longer than the other, so I am just going to adjust it down a tad right here and see if that makes the two line up, and it does. So that way, when I get this sewn across here, it's going to be even all the way across. I'm going to go nice and slow since I'm going through 4 layers of Dacron here. And a reversing stitch. And we'll come forward. One more reversing stitch. All right. Okay, we're going to repeat the same thing now on the other side, doing exactly what we just did there. All right, I'm just going to trim my extra threads here at the ends. There we go. Do that. Press it down, and then we fold this out. So you can kind of see here, I now have this bottom seam lined up with this side seam. What we want to do is measure about 3.5 inches down on this. So once you have these two lined up, you want to measure about 3.5 inches in from the corner and just make a mark there.
I'm actually going to put nothing, just the...
And this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew across this, and that's going to essentially become the bottom of the bag. So let me show you what we're going to do. We're going to do it on both sides. I'm going to sew across here, then I'm going to cut that section off. So now that I have that marked, I want to hold this kind of carefully. This gets a little interesting here. I'm going to remove my seam adjuster. And I'm now going to sew just inside of this. And then I'm going to cut it off of there. So let's put that down. You'll notice I have this thick seam here. And this is why it's good to, if you can iron it out first, it's a little nice to press it out real well. If not, you end up with a bit of a ripple right there. So I'm doing my best to hold those apart. All right, so we've done that on the one side, and now we need to do the exact same thing on the opposite side. Just like before, we're going to line those up. Again, we want to open these seams where we can, increase that, and we're going to mark 3.5 inches down from the point. All right, and once you've done this, now it's just time to pull this bag in right. And that is going to give us that square bottom I was mentioning. You can kind of see how it's shaped square. Now, this sail fabric's not real easy to turn back in right. Now, because the sailcloth is pretty rigid, you got to kind of push out in these corners, get them the way you want. So now it's just a matter of choosing the handle material you want. We just used cotton strapping rather than polypropylene just because they might potentially be in the sun on the boat and they'll degrade. I like them to be long enough to hang over the shoulder if we need to carry several. So I'm going to do these at 32 inches long. That'll give me the ability to run 6 inches down the side of the bag and still have a good size loop. Let's go ahead and get these measured. So at this point, we want to get our bag here and we want to mark where we're going to put the actual handle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this and I'm going to fold it without making it square here for just a minute, just because it's going to be a little easier when we do this section. So for our handles, we're going to want to do these about 6 inches in from each side. So we've got 18 inches or so here. So yeah, if we do 6 inches on each side, we'll have 6 inches between them. So I think that makes sense. Let's do, I'm going to do 5.5. We'll mark it right on the inside of that. We'll do 5.5 from this side. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to put this right on the inside of it, but I want to go down 6 inches with this. Gives me 6 inches right there. I'm going to go just on the edge of that mark to hide it. And again, I said before, I don't like pinning these on this kind of material, but I'm going to need to do something here. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this right into the inner hem. And when you do this, you want to just kind of make this strap nice and smooth. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. 6 inches in. Alright, so we've got those marked and it's now time to sew them. What we're going to do is when we sew these, we're going to do a square right here that's even with the hem at the top, and then I'm going to come down both sides of these and I'm going to do another square and with an X through it and then up the other side. Those X's will give me a lot of extra strength, and I like having those X's right up in here because this is where there's going to be a double layer of Dacron and the strap. It's going to take on most of the weight right there.
After repeating and putting all of the straps on, it was now time to sew that hem that was left over.
It was a little rough to get the bag sort of maneuvered into place here, but once I did, I sewed a hem all the way around the entire bag, about 1/4 inch from the top. And then I went ahead and went down about 3/4 of an inch to the bottom side of that upper hem, and I repeated the process. At that point, you can essentially be done. I did decide to do one more zigzag stitch between those two, just to practice and give it a decorative look. So as you just saw, I went ahead and did a line stitch all the way along the edge. I'm not great at this, so it's not a perfectly straight line, but I came down about 3/4 of an inch from that, and I did another line stitch, and then just to give it a decorative look, I went ahead and did a zigzag stitch between it. It doesn't look great, but I wanted to try something kind of unique given that the machine can do that. So now it's just a matter of, again, kind of forming this bag in, because you notice when I was sewing that, it's hard on a home sewing machine. You can sort of pull the case out of the way and you can run the bag underneath it. Really couldn't do that this way, so I almost had to sew it inside out a little bit. So the stitch on the inside is probably the slightly nicer stitch, and I have a couple of the backlock threads on the outside, but I'm okay with that. And there you have it. You know, so ready to go, put groceries or whatever in, and nice little bag. You might remember in the beginning, I'm like, oh, I like the idea of having these triple stitch zigzags go vertically on the bag. Well, that's not the way I placed them, so they had to go horizontally given my pattern, but I still like it. Yeah, I'm pleased. There we go. One bag down, and now we can start experimenting and changing them a little bit more. But if you're interested in this kind of pattern, I'll try and list something down below that lists the items. Again, it is 2 panels that are 21 inches by 20. And again, we sewed the 20-inch side together with the printed material facing itself. We then went ahead and opened it up. Iron it if it's a regular material. You can't do that, obviously, with Dacron. I then folded it back up again the way it was with the inner fabrics facing themselves. I folded down a 1-inch hem along the top edges, what would ultimately be this top up here. And then I went ahead and sewed up the sides of it. At that point, I turned it in right? So I essentially turned it back in right. And then attached, and then went ahead and attached the straps. You can choose your strap length. If you wanted to do something for really heavy bags, you actually sew these straps all the way down and across the bottom, so that they're really taking the burden of the load. I ran these 6 inches down with locking stitch boxes at the top and here in the middle, and then it's got the zigzag going across it. So I think at this point that's definitely strong enough for anything I'm going to carry in this size bag. I don't intend to carry lead in it. It's really for groceries and whatnot. But once I did that, it was a matter of doing a stitch right along the very top edge of this hem, and then another one down an inch or so, whatever the bottom side of the hem is, and then you can do any decorations you want. In our case, I went ahead and did the zigzag stitch. We could also have sewn a pocket right in here, so if you wanted something for a pocket, we could have done that as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's video where we went ahead and did something different. Made grocery bags or tote bags out of old sails. Thanks, everybody. From Gil, Deb, and the kiddos aboard Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser. I'll show you a little bit of the video that I found McKinley making when I was over there cleaning up. It's kind of cute. I'll give her back the microphone while she keeps going. Bye, y'all.
We do this video every day on the boat, on the boat, on the boat. I do not like the boat. I like the camper. The camper has an outdoor kitchen and an indoor kitchen, which I like the outdoor kitchen because there's more milk in there. And I like those juice packs in there. Cut.